This is the Reluctant Leader podcast, the podcast designed to help you step out of the shadows and become an inspirational leader. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and each episode I will be getting to grips with a leadership topic by interviewing an expert in their field. I'll be picking their brains for those golden nuggets that will help you be the best you can be. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing at thereluctantleader.co.uk, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So let's get on with the show. Today I'm talking to Bevis Moynan. Bevis is a trainer of neuro-linguistic programming and is a senior trainer of motivational mapping. He trains coaches, consultants and professionals to work with businesses and individuals with the purpose of improving motivation and performance. This is achieved through a deeper awareness of the real challenges that face each and every one of us in modern life. His philosophy helps grow awareness in a surprisingly simple and practical way. Hope you enjoy this little chat we had about mental health, and I will catch you all on the other side. So Bevis, welcome to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Oh, hey Mark, good to talk.
I was looking forward to talking to you today, as I do with everybody really. And one of the things that we've talked about in the past is mental health, and it's obviously something that is close to both our hearts. So I've been looking forward to talking about that as we progress through the podcast. But one of the things that I ask everybody right at the beginning is that what I'd like to know, and I'm sure our listeners would like to know, is why do you do what you do, and what was the pivotal moment that led you to do it?
Oh, crikey. So, yeah, there were a couple of pivotal moments, really. I mean, if we kind of go all the way back, growing up, I was madly passionate about cricket, and kind of developed a sense of self-worth and self-esteem around playing cricket. It's worth mentioning I grew up in Yorkshire, which probably makes a bit more sense for people. Yorkshire is internationally, India is the hub of cricket. Everybody plays cricket.
Is that official?
Well, it is nowadays. They're kind of madly passionate about cricket in India, and full stadiums. And Yorkshire is the equivalent in England. There's more cricket played in Yorkshire than in Australia. So I grew up madly passionate about cricket. And looking back, I kind of ended up, without really realising it, there was points on that journey that where I stopped enjoying it. And I didn't notice at the time because I wasn't aware enough. Obviously, I was quite young. But I remember being stood on the cricket field, being terrified of dropping a catch. I was kind of representing Yorkshire at the time. I went on to play for England at amateur level. And so, if you like, my journey started then because I ended up becoming so afraid that I had a county cricket trial that I didn't turn up to. And again, I wasn't really aware what was going on. I just chose to bail from that opportunity. And so years later, when I was 30 years old, the chairman of my cricket club, and again, cricket was still a big part of my life. Age 30, I was captain of my local club and on the committee and trained twice a week and playing twice a weekend. He literally overnight handed in his notice from his national sales role and started up a new business. And I was like, oh, hang on, what's that all about, James? And he started to have some conversations with me about NLP, which was sufficient that made me curious. And that's all it was. And I was still very, how do I say this? I guess I was pretty cynical about personal development. Mm-hmm. At that stage of my life, I thought life coaches were con artists. I was a pretty dour, typical northerner back then. And no offence for our northern listeners who are more enlightened than I was. So I found myself on a one-day intro day. And again, that sparked my curiosity to then actually invest in myself and found myself on a 7-day practitioner course. So that was a start, really. Mm-hmm. And on that journey, I then learned loads about management. I was in a management role at the time, managing people, managing teams of people, getting frustrated by all the usual things managers get frustrated by: inability to handle conflict, squabbling within the team. I used to get frustrated by my team's inability to deal with complaints effectively. So I was really on the course twofold, really. One, just because I was curious about something James had said, and obviously what he'd done, and two, because I wanted to improve as a manager and as a leader. So that was the starting point, and then obviously I've just continued learning from there, really.
Right. Yes. So those pivotal moments obviously important in the decision you made, and obviously we're all influenced by others and seeing what other people are doing. It was interesting you mentioned about the cynical part, because a lot of people are cynical about learning and personal development, and it takes a while to get to that point where you're accepting of different knowledge, and we know that not everything's going to help us, but it's actually being open-minded enough to actually accept there are things that will help us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was kind of blown away by what I learned that week that really helped me as a manager and as a leader, helped grow my confidence and my influencing skills, and obviously learned lots of things that I didn't know. There was also still things that I learned I was still very cynical about. The therapeutic elements of NLP I was still very, very cynical about. And it wasn't really until I committed to the master practitioner journey a couple of years later, back in 2010, where it was during that week that I overcome or understood this pattern of avoiding failure and being afraid of failing, and a sort of self-sabotage pattern that had run from my teenage years onwards, where I was avoiding failure to stay safe and stay comfortable. And it was like a massive light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh, geez. And letting go of that pattern, really. I mean, I went on my master practitioner course in 2010, with the intention again of it helping me in my career. And the day I left the course, I set up a new business. So that was definitely a pivotal moment. The next pivotal moment after that, and I know these are close to mine and your heart, some 8 months later, I had set the business up. I was now coaching. I was still employed. I told my boss I was leaving, and he was actually quite open to that. We were just having a conversation about exit plans. And then I filled one of these strange motivational map things out. And I was already on the journey. But what the map did for me is it really explained fully that as a high searcher spirit creator, working in local government at the time as a manager, I was absolutely doing the right things. And my kind of dreamy, wishy-washy plan, which had a bit of a vision in it, all of a sudden became much more concrete, much more firm. And I then I actually sat down after I'd completed my map with my boss at the time, who's still a good friend, and said, look, my intention now is to have left within 12 months. So the map really gave me the confidence to understand what was motivating. I'll never forget Nick, the chap who debriefed my map. I'll never forget him saying to me, Bevis, it's not like you're ever going to want less freedom. And I was like, oh, shit. And I meant, because I was excited, I was like, he's so right. I'm not going to want less freedom, and I'm feeling a bit constrained as it is. So I kind of knew, and that was another light bulb where I went, all of a sudden I just knew, it was almost like I knew I had to carry on and actually follow through on what started. Whereas up until that point, you know what it's like when you're part of this kind of thinking, oh, well, I could just stay a bit long, you know what I mean? At that moment, I fully committed, which of course is both terrifying and exciting.
Yeah, and we're all looking for signs that we're doing the right thing, and obviously that's another thing that came along to confirm that what you were doing was the right path. I think it'd be worthwhile just going back to what you said about your top drivers there, the spirit searcher and creator, and just to say what they mean, because there will obviously be people listening wondering what those characteristics are.
Yeah, well, back then my number one driver or motivational preference was spirit, which is around freedom, independence, autonomy, doing your own things in your own way, in your own time. The beautiful thing about the map is you also get a score of how you're feeling. So I was feeling 40% fulfilled in that driver, which again makes a lot of sense when you work in local government. They just brought this thing in that you had to share your calendar so that people could see what you were doing every moment of every day, and I really didn't like that. So yeah, there was the search. The spirit was my top driver. The search was number two, which is around meaning and purpose and doing worthwhile work and helping other people. And albeit that wasn't that poorly fulfilled at the time, because I was working in leisure, helping people ultimately to get fitter and more active, and developing kind of leisure centres and projects. I knew it also wasn't where my passion was going. I'd found this new passion around coaching and consulting, and that's where I wanted to. That's, if you like, where my energy was flowing. That was the direction.
Yeah.
And then the third driver was, for me, and still is, innovation and creativity, doing new things in new ways, new ideas. And again, that helped me unpick a lot of conflict at the time from where I was working. Because, of course, I was working with a lot of people who were motivated by security and stability. And it actually really helped me, albeit I was exiting, it really helped me improve the quality of my relationships with my peers during the last 12 months of my work. So much so that when I left, I ended up consulting for my old employers and actually doing some motivational map projects with a chap called John, who had previously been my nemesis. And I mean that in the nicest possible word. Me and John are good friends, but we certainly clashed for a number of years.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I've heard your story a few times, and obviously John was important in that you had a challenge with him, didn't you? And obviously, clearly, you were driven by two things which you weren't aware of, but obviously by using maps and the technology that we use to highlight what motivates us, we can actually have those conversations which don't change anything, but actually just heightens our awareness and stops those conflicts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really, that's the best example I've got for understanding the language around motivation. All of a sudden, I had a new language. And bear in mind, I was trained in NLP at the time, so I was already reasonably skilled around language. But I hadn't appreciated that for John, who's somebody who's motivated by security and stability, predictability, loyalty, that I was being seen as a threat. Because I kept talking about culture and innovation and doing things independently. And what happened was we found a common language. I was able to then explain. Obviously, my role was all around change, but I was able to explain change to John in a way in which led to longer term security and stability for him and his team, which was actually true. That was the case. We were aiming to do that. Yeah. I just never verbalized it in that way because that wasn't important to me, but it was really important to him. And that was a big insight or big learning for me. That.
Yeah. Okay, right. So we should move on now to talk about the subject of this podcast, which is mental health. I think the first thing I want to ask you is why mental health in particular you want to talk about?
Well, I think mental health is on the radar. It's on the agenda right now, and quite rightly too. I mean, I was watching the television during Mental Health Week and released statistics around 1 in 4 people having a mental health condition, and that really got me thinking because it's a funny one. And they were talking also about schools, about how again 1 in 4 children having an undiagnosed condition. And it really got me thinking. Obviously, I've got 2 young children at school. I work as a therapist, life coach, business coach, consultant. I've done lots of what you might call practical coaching, helping people, but I've also done quite a lot of therapeutic coaching, helping people to overcome past emotional scar tissue and past trauma. So I feel reasonably well positioned to have a conversation about mental health. And what struck me was that out of those 1 in 4, which I do believe is a step forward because it's being more widely recognised, I wouldn't have been considered one of those 1 in 4 when I was at school. And my good mate Andy wouldn't have been considered as 1 in 4 when he was at school. Yet both of us I had a pattern of avoiding failure that was growing, and I was getting more and more afraid about the thing I was most passionate about. And my good mate Andy would openly admit he nearly had a bit of a breakdown when he was 22, not long after he'd left education. So it got me thinking that I think mental health can have, I think the stigma is reducing, but I kind of feel like mental health affects everybody. Because at the end of the day, and this is the one piece of information that kind of really helped me improve my quality of life, the way we feel is largely affected by our thoughts. And we all have 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And you know what? Some of those thoughts are absolute nonsense. Yeah. So, in fact, if we're honest, a lot of those thoughts are absolutely nonsense.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like you've either got a mental health condition or you haven't. I feel like everybody's quality of mental health goes up and down every moment of every day.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think that's spot on. And I've noticed, it's funny how when you start, it's like anything, when you start looking for stuff, you're looking for a red car and everything, there's red cars everywhere. But recently, when I noticed I'm going to be talking about mental health, I've lots of things have been popping up. And what I've noticed is that the word or the phrase mental health first aider is popping up a lot. And it's interesting when we talk about first aid, we talk about physical wellness and that side of things, but mental health first aid, there is probably even more need because it's not physical. We can't see it, we can't feel it as in the same way as maybe a physical ailment.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. There's a real need there, and there's a real need for heightened awareness, and it doesn't have to be complicated. And because the beautiful thing about being human is we know how we're feeling because of our emotions. Our emotions tell us how we're feeling. And what we begin to understand is that when we're not feeling good, our thought processes aren't as clear. So if a mental health first aider or a coach or a therapist or a counsellor or a psychotherapist or a hypnotherapist, whoever, all of us people who are out there in the world of helping other people, or if let's be honest, just a good mate. We've all been that person, haven't we, where somebody just vents to us, and at the end of venting, the person says, "Oh, I feel so much better," and you've done nothing other than just sit or stand and listen without judgment. And I think that's the thing, because when what's happening unconsciously comes out of the person's mind, either onto paper or is verbalized, you do begin to feel better because the conscious mind starts to make sense of what's going on. So I'm kind of excited by the mental health movement, if there is such a thing, because ultimately that core message that our thoughts create our feelings is one that me and you take for granted now, having been in this personal development world for a little while. Yeah. But the vast majority of the population have no idea. That they think I am anxious, and they've not. And if you feel you are anxious, there's kind of nothing you can do about it, because there's a feeling. I was having a coaching session yesterday with a lady whose son had a panic attack at school, and it turned out they found where it came from and what the trigger was. But he didn't feel like he felt disempowered because it was just, I have anxiety. Well, when you understand that it's actually anxious thinking that's causing anxiety, then there's all of a sudden you're empowered to find out what the thinking is and have a conversation about that thinking and hopefully let go of that thinking and move forward. So I'm really, I'm passionate about mental health because I don't know how many thousands of hours of coaching I've done, but lots. And even when it's labelled business coaching, it's largely not. It's about helping people find clarity, peace of mind, and often helping them to improve their relationships at home as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really no such thing as business coaching as such. It's people coaching, isn't it? Yeah. Majority of the time, that's the case anyway.
Absolutely.
So I absolutely resonate with what you're saying, because I can remember when I was in my leadership position, going back a few years, that I felt trapped in what I was doing. I felt that I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the knowledge, felt that it was just on a downward spiral of just getting worse and worse, and all this this feeling of being responsible for the business and the people that worked in it. You can quite quickly get into that downward spiral of there's no way out of this, what can I do, and not really finding anything that can help you. And I think the important thing of what you've already mentioned is actually just reaching out and finding people that can help you, because there's a myriad of people that can help, especially with mental health, and stop you to getting into that downward spiral of thinking, so that you actually make better decisions based on clearer thinking, which isn't about the emotional situation that you're stuck in, or you feel you're stuck in.
Yeah, absolutely, because the emotion is only a product of. I mean, I like to use the analogy that what is stress? Because stress is an overused word. Stress really is repeated pressure. And what is repeated pressure? Well, pressure ultimately, if we experience it as human beings, is repeated thought and repeating patterns of thought. So yeah, the main thing is to reach out, because it's, if you like, our egoic mind isolates. And when we're not feeling good, so my client yesterday nearly didn't turn up. She was like, "Oh, I felt so bad. I didn't want to never." And I was like, so pleased. She chose to not react from the place of negative emotion and if you like, act from a higher place of consciousness. Now, this will be good for me. And then within an hour, she's feeling great because all of a sudden she feels like she's got some solutions. So absolutely reaching out and talking to somebody. And I had the same experience after I became a parent. I don't share this story very often, but 2 months after becoming a parent, I wasn't feeling quite right. And I had no idea why. And at the time, I was a master practitioner of NLP. I was a master practitioner of timeline therapy, hypnosis, and trained in motivational mapping. And I was telling myself the story, you shouldn't feel this way because you know all of this stuff. But the fact of the matter was I did feel that way. And actually, having then reached out, I told them that I was kind of spent a couple of months battling with myself and resisting it, which I think if anybody is listening to this story, having experienced something different, as soon as you stop battling and stop resisting and accept that there is something not quite right, that's the moment that things start to improve for you. So I was lucky. I was part of a coach community. So I reached out to a couple of people I really trust, had a couple of conversations. And the upshot ultimately was what I realized was that there was just a lack of space in my life for me. So I was really busy coaching 30 plus hours a week and all of the admin and administration around running a business. And then I was coming home, and obviously as a new dad, things were busy at home too. And there was also a little bit of guilt around feeling that way. So it took a little while and a few conversations, and the upshot was I ended up learning to meditate. And I now meditate regularly, aim to meditate every day, don't manage that all the time. But that created that space just for me. And when we say space, I don't mean space to watch telly or to read a book even, but space to just really clear your mind. And that's been hugely beneficial for me. And of course, the health benefits of meditation are now proven.
Yeah. And as you've mentioned it again there, the importance of just reaching out and talking. It doesn't necessarily have to be an expert, just someone that is going to listen. I was talking, it was another podcast episode actually, and the expression to give a good listening to was mentioned. And I thought, yes, that's so important, because we talk about people, having a good talking to, but actually have a good listening to is just as important. And just being able to have someone listen to you, not give you any, wisdom or answers, just to listen to you and just say, well, actually what you're doing or how you're feeling is actually absolutely fine, and it'll pass, or it's just having someone there just to listen is so important.
I couldn't agree more. It's that listening without judgment, because often people have emotions of shame or embarrassment or guilt, and the moment that people realize that they're not being judged and that they are being listened to, and that they are able to then trust and offload and then begin to rationalize some of the thought processes. It's just the process of speaking. You become more aware of what's going on. In the book that I wrote with James Sale on mapping motivational coaching, James said that part of the role of a coach is to paraphrase what your clients just said to you. And I was like, is it? I'm not sure it is. And the next session, I found myself doing just that. I went, no, James,
so you're already doing it. It's just that someone said it and you actually realise actually that is what I do anyway, without even thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think being able to offload when you're not feeling good to somebody that you trust, whether that be a friend, a colleague, or somebody, or a counsellor, coach, whoever, is such a huge part. And I think the thing is about mental health, we should let go of the stigma. Really, it's just such a wonderful process of managing our thoughts. Because I think that affects, well, in fact, I don't think, I know, that affects everybody, whoever we are, whether we consider ourselves to have a mental health issue or not.
Absolutely. And I think it'd be worth sort of just expanding on maybe some other signs of if our mental health is maybe on the decline. You've mentioned a few things, but is there anything else that comes to mind, that signs that you are starting to, maybe not make good decisions? Yeah. Well,
I think there's twofold here. There's the signs for the individual, and there's the signs for, if you like, employers or managers or leaders. So signs for individual are actually that you're low on energy, obviously, I say obviously, but people might not link the two, being lower on energy than normal, withdrawing, and I don't mean just deciding to stay in one evening because you're a bit tired. I mean persistently withdrawing from activity and, if you like, social activities. So withdrawing, being low on energy, and of course the obvious one is experiencing persistent negative emotion. The negative, and a thing I try and help people to appreciate is negative emotion is a gift. It doesn't feel like it, but it really is, because it's telling you that there's something to learn about your thought processes, which once you've learned, that emotional pattern will disappear. So those would be the signs for an individual: low on energy, withdrawal, and persistent negative emotion. For a manager or a leader, actually paying attention, it sounds an odd one, but body language. When people aren't feeling good, you and people get this. I ask this on workshops. If somebody's a bit not feeling good or a bit depressed, where are they looking? They're often looking down. Their body language is often slouched and looking down to the left or the right. So paying attention to body language, and again, also paying attention for people reacting emotionally in an irrational manner, because obviously that is a sign of at least stress, if not other things. So I think the two things combined, paying attention to body language and paying attention to instances where people are seeming to be reacting in a manner that doesn't fit with previous behaviour and patterns of behaviour that you know of, or where people become emotional or overly emotional in circumstances that don't seem to, where previously they perhaps wouldn't have.
Yeah. And I think the tendency maybe in the past has been to try to well, maybe I'm not qualified, I'm not going to get involved, but just offering to listen, as we've already mentioned, is so valuable in many instances.
Absolutely. There's a poster at one of the places I work, which is around child well-being, and the poster is basically showing a poster of the child, and it said, "Don't wait until it's too late." And it's a really evocative kind of poster, because it can crikey, you don't want to be that person who doesn't speak up when something's happening, and I think, look, we should care for people's, and if we look at it from a business productivity point of view, if someone often nowadays stress, I don't know the stats, but I'd like to think, I'm fairly sure, should I say, that stress is one of the number one causes of people being off work and loss of productivity. So handling and managing that build up from thoughts to pressure to stress to mental illness, it's like we want to create a break in that process, a release valve for people, so that they don't just, and if we can spot the signs as a colleague, a manager, or a leader, then there's something we can do about it, which is great.
Yeah, and it's keeping a check in, like you say. Anybody that's just a little bit not quite themselves, and offer an ear to listen. Is everything okay? Obviously, we could talk about this for hours, Bevis, and I think obviously all what you've already said is really valuable. But just to finish off a conversation, I'd just like to maybe offer you the opportunity just to sum up maybe 3 tips for those listening that maybe are in a leadership role, how they can use what we've talked about to maintain theirs and their team's mental health.
Yeah, well, I think the first tip is to take it seriously. And I know that sounds pretty glib, but what I mean by that is that often mental health hasn't been dealt with because people haven't known how to deal with it, if that makes sense. So I think the first thing is to realize that this isn't actually that it isn't as challenging to deal with as people think. What we need is to be paying attention to it and providing conduits for people to have honest conversations. So how you go about doing that, whether it be creating internal coaches, loads of great examples of internal coaching in Google and bigger organizations, as well as small businesses having HR members of the team coming in or having external coaches in. So really pay attention to and invest in your people. Don't see it as just dealing with mental health. See it as dealing with improving performance, improving productivity, improving efficiency, and also making sure you're looking after people along that journey so you don't have one of your top performer suddenly off with stress for 5 months. Because when people lose their top staff and they haven't spotted those signs, that really can cripple small businesses and have a real big negative impact on larger organisations too. So I think number one thing would be take it seriously and start looking at what can be done with mental health and performance on a wider scale by looking after people. And I think linked with that is then about just having meetings about it, paying attention to it, and thinking about either creating internal coaches or mental health first aiders, or using your network of because most people have got some quality. If they aren't linked with quality coaches, they're never too far away these days. There's lots of quality coaches and consultants out there that can help.
Yeah, great stuff. So thank you, Bevis. It's been really fascinating. I'm hoping that we can talk again, hopefully, in the future about something similar or even the same subject, because there's lots more to talk about with mental health. But for now, thank you, and hope you have a great day.
No, thank you, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity to talk, and obviously happy to chat again at any time. Take care. Thank you, mate.
Thank you for listening today. As action leads to outcomes, make sure you make a note to start, stop, or continue doing whatever struck a chord in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe at thereluctantleader.co.uk, where you'll find links to all the past episodes, blogs, and how you can get in touch with me. Until next time, bye for now.